Please, the court, members of the jury.
Good morning, Mr. Russell.
I'm sure when you all received your jury summonses back in late January or February and told to be here on March 5th, that you reacted like every good red-blooded American reacts, right? Right? Oh my God. Jury started saying, I got to deal with the kids, I got to deal with my job, I got to drive downtown, I got to find a parking space, I'm going to have to go sit in the 7th floor of the building for no reason, to waste a whole day down there, and it's just a complete waste of time. And then you came down here, you got here on March 5th, it was the first day, March 6th for some of you, and you sat up there and found out that you were going to be part of the group of 125 jurors that came down here to courtroom 1C for the case of Tex McIver. Some of you no doubt were like, who the heck's Tex McIver? I've never heard of him. Some of you were like, I seem to remember something about that in the news, but whatever. I'll go downstairs, waste my time, and then get to go home. And of course, so here we are. 7 weeks later, you didn't get to go home. And I suppose that this has been quite an experience for all of you. You will never forget this experience, I can tell you. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, someone's going to say to you, "Have you ever served on a jury?" And you're going to say, "Oh boy, did I ever sit on a jury? I sure did." And you'll remember this experience the rest of your lives. My closing remarks are a lot like Conley's in that I'm going to review the law with you. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the structure of what the indictment is and how it works in this case. And I'm also going to do a little bit more, I'm going to spend a little bit more time than she did talking about some of the facts and how we believe the facts fit into the indictment, how the facts fit into the law that the judge is going to instruct you about. First of all, I think that we have to talk about what we're doing here. What is your job here? And we call it deliberations, we talk about reaching a verdict, but it's actually something that you all do all day long, which is you're going to have to make a decision, right? I mean, you all make decisions all day long. All day long you're making decisions. There are some decisions that are remarkably trivial and unimportant. Decisions like, where am I going to go to dinner tonight? Where am I going to, what restaurant should I go to? Something like that. Just incredibly trivial decisions. And then there are more important decisions. What school should I go to? What school should I send my kids to? What should I do about a child who wants to join the Army, perhaps? And these are decisions that are more important, decisions that require more information. And then there are decisions you make that are just truly momentous decisions, decisions that you don't make every day or every week or every month. And these are the decisions that the most important decisions that you make. God forbid someday having to make a decision about a medical procedure for a child or a parent or dealing with life support, that kind of decision. And I suggest to you that the decision that you'll be making today when you go back out and begin your deliberations, however long it takes, hours or days, that this is, in fact, one of the more important decisions that you will ever make in your life. Reaching a verdict in a criminal case that will affect the life of a fellow citizen. When you make a decision about what flavor ice cream, to choose, when you go to Baskin-Robbins, you make a decision about what restaurant you go to. You don't need a whole lot of information, right? You can look at the lines outside the restaurant, figure it must be a good restaurant. You can read some reviews in the newspaper and think, well, that's good enough for me. Some other reviewer said it's good, that's good enough for me. And then there are, the more important decisions, the decisions like, should my child join the Army or what college to go to? You need more information. You need the type of information that is much more reliable. Medical decisions, you want second opinions. And so the importance of the decision is a factor, is what determines how much information you need. And the judge is going to tell you in this case, as Ms. Converse said, that what you need to make a decision in this case is proof beyond reasonable doubt. Same definition that Ms. Conver uses. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof of, it's not a vague or an arbitrary doubt. I'm not talking about doubts that are just whimsical, like whatever was on her car, the green dust on her car. That's easy. I mean, those are just easy. Obviously, that's a ridiculous doubt. And nobody's going to suggest to you here today, either Mr. Harvey or I, will say that's the kind of doubt that you ought to use to find the defendant not guilty. That is just plain ridiculous. Okay? I'm going to go through with you what the doubts are in this case. Okay? I'm going to talk to you about doubts that exist, about the state's theory, and about the evidence that they've presented here. And I caution you as I begin, you don't need, I'm going to just list 16 the most prominent doubts. You don't need 16 doubts to return a verdict of not guilty. You just need one doubt, one reasonable doubt about the theory of the prosecution's case. If you have one reasonable doubt, you don't have an option. At that point, your verdict must be not guilty. This concept of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, by the way, I can sit here and rhapsodize about the importance of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This is not a trivial matter. Okay? I mean, this is not TV talk. Okay? When you all go home at the end of this trial, I'm sure you're all going to watch courtroom TV dramas like we all do. We all do, all the time. Right? And you're going to tell the people who were sitting there with you, this is not the way a real trial is. When you're sitting with your spouse or your kids, or you're going to say, let me tell you something. There's nothing about this TV show that's even close to what it's actually like, or this movie that I'm watching that's even close to being what a real life jury is. Except My Cousin Vinny. If you've seen that, that's incredibly realistic and accurate. But putting that aside, the concept of proof beyond a reasonable doubt is not a trivial matter. It's not a matter of etiquette, like saying please and thank you. It is part of the cornerstone of our Constitution. It's part of the cornerstone of our society, a free society. So don't go back out there and when you're deliberating and say, well, I think he did it, or I think he didn't do it, or I have some doubts. This is the standard you must use to make a decision in this case. Before I start going through the doubts, I want to talk first about the state's theory, which even to this day, we don't fully understand what the state's theory is about this case. And even in Ms. Convery's argument, she talks about malice, either express or implied, and it can be formed instantaneously. She's right, that's what the law says. You can form malice instantaneously. We don't require premeditation for weeks or months in order to return a verdict, a guilty of murder. So here are the choices that we seem to have developed during the course of this trial. In the opening statement, Ms. Griffin said that this was a planned, intentional, and calculated murder. Okay, that's the first position the state took. Was this a well-planned, deliberate murder? Was the shooting planned, intentional, and calculated, like Ms. Griffin said? That's one option. The second option is, did he decide at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night after a pleasant weekend at the ranch and dinner at Longhorn Steakhouse to kill the woman he loved? That's the other theory they've developed, that she nagged him, that she complained about his weight, that she yelled at him in the car about not going to sleep, and then Ms. Convery says you can form malice in an instant to suggest that this perhaps is the option. Okay? Don't worry about all the pre-planning. As long as when the gun was fired he intended to kill, that's enough. But so it's got to be one of those two, ultimately, is the state's theory. Either it's a well-planned, deliberate, planned, intentional, calculated murder, or something snapped at 10 o'clock at night driving up Peter. Let's talk about the first theory, the planned, deliberate, intentional killing. And Mr. Harvey's going to talk about the other option to some extent. Because Ms. Convery clearly spent most of the time talking about how this was a planned, deliberate, calculated murder. First of all, we don't really know for sure what the prosecution's theory is as to why. Right? We spent a week and a half talking about potential financial motives, none of which make any sense. Again, Mr. Harvey's going to talk about the finances. but they speculate maybe there was a second will, maybe something about the property, maybe she was going to foreclose on him. There's zero evidence of any of those things happening. There's zero evidence she was going to foreclose on the $350,000, or that there was a second will, or that there was some concern that drove him at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, it's now or never. There's no evidence to support that. Was he jealous? Was there another woman? We've certainly heard about that, right? We've heard about, and I'm going to talk about some of these doubts and red herrings here. You know, Danny Jo had her shirt untucked. Do you remember that? Seems like last year. Danny Jo had her shirt untucked at Corey the day before they drove out to the ranch with a masseuse, Annie. And we heard all about these and Janie Calhoun, we heard about that. So maybe the theory is if it wasn't financial, maybe there was some other reason why he did it. Or maybe he just was tired of being nagged about his weight or her sharp elbows, as they described it. Whatever. Let's talk about the theory that it's a planned, intentional murder. I'm going to give you 16 doubts. And the first one is the one that Amanda talked about in her opening statement. They were in love. Okay? You can poo-poo that. You can say that's ridiculous. You can say whatever you want to say. But there is no doubt about it. They were like little teenagers in love. Young teenagers in love. We had witnesses testify that they would be in the kitchen cooking and someone would walk in and there they'd be kissing. Right? Like our teenagers do. Okay? Or they were just together all the time. Nobody ever saw them fight. Nobody ever saw them arguing. Nobody ever heard her say, I'm going to foreclose if you don't pay me my money. Nobody ever heard her say anything about my second will is going to affect, next week. There was nothing like that. How can you ignore that evidence? How can you ignore the fact that they clearly were in love? These are all, with the exception of Andy Anderson, every one of these is a prosecution witness. These are their witnesses that they want you to credit. Every one of them talked about how much in love they were. Every one of them testified that there was no arguing between them, there was no hostility between them, there was no animosity between them, and yet the jury wants you to, the prosecution wants you to just ignore all that and say, nevertheless, 10 o'clock, Sunday night, September 25th, I'm going to kill her. The woman I love. That's number one. Consider the events of that weekend. We've heard from Danny Jo Carter. We've heard from Craig Stringer. They are going to the ranch together that they love, right? They have a wonderful time there, according to Danny Jo Carter. They have dinner together. They go out and play golf in the afternoon. Mr. Stringer talks about a typical day of golf. Can you imagine? I'm getting ready to murder my wife. Let's go play around the golf. That's clearly the last thing we should be doing before I kill you. They leave the golf and they drive to Longhorn Steakhouse. They're going to have dinner together. Craig Stringer says there's nothing unusual about the dinner. It was a typical loving couple. There was nothing at the dinner to show that he was distracted, distraught, looking out the window or doing anything like that. Then they get in the car and they drive back. Danny Jo Carter says there's nothing unusual about this evening. There's nothing suspicious about the behavior. They drive back to Atlanta. It makes no sense. I want you to use the same common sense that Ms. Convery asked you to use. This is not the behavior of someone who's getting ready to commit a murder. They have this wonderful weekend together. This, as much as anything, if you're going to murder someone, please just use some common sense. If you're going to murder someone, why do you shoot her in front of her best friend? Why would you do that? Come up with one reason that says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait till Danny Jo Carter is, 8 inches away from me and 8 inches away from her best friend. That's when I'm going to commit the crime. And try to sell that on, to Hollywood or a TV show, and they say that's a ridiculous plot. It makes no sense. There's no logic to that at all. Why? Think of all the opportunities, frankly. Not that any of them really make sense as to why. You're out on the farm, you're out on the ranch, you go hunting, you go walking in the trails, you're in the house, but he waits until he's in a car with her best friend. She's not, Danny Jo Carter's not beholden to Tex in any way. She's not going to be his alibi. And yet that's what the prosecution says, this planned, deliberate, intentional, calculated murder. Let me wait until her best friend is 8 inches away to do it. Why in Atlanta? Part of what I just argued. You know, why not? We heard testimony that his best friend, his great friend, is the sheriff of Putnam County. Remember one of the witnesses testified about that? Why do you wait till you're in the middle of Fulton County in Atlanta in a car on Piedmont Road? Do it in Putnam County, right? There's been talk about which hospital did you go to? Why did you choose Emory? You remember how I got laughed at and the judge finally started fussing at me about the billboards about Emory. You know, why'd you choose Emory? It's not a trauma center. Should have gone to Grady or something, and the judge was fussing at me. Why not do that on I-20 in Rockdale County? You don't have to worry about Grady or Emory out there. Do it out in Putnam County on I-20. If you've decided for some reason the best way to do this planned, calculated murder, the best place to do it is in the car with Danny Jo, but you don't want to look suspicious about choosing Emory over Grady or Piedmont, Midtown. Piedmont or Emory, Midtown, Rockdale County, Walton County, somewhere out on the interstate. There's no hospitals out there. Nobody would know how to get to a hospital out in Conyers or Covington. Why fall asleep? You got to talk about sleep. If you're about to commit an intentional, calculated, whatever, deliberate murder, are you just going to fall asleep all the way from Putnam County until Longhorn, and then fall asleep at Longhorn after dinner and getting off the extra way? Okay? It makes no sense that you're going to fall asleep. Let me deviate here and talk a little bit about the experts we heard. Dr. Rye and Dr. Pressman. They are both incredibly well credentialed. No doubt about it. They're both very exceptionally qualified experts or doctors. Dr. Rye is an MD, PhD, published, Emory, once again, Emory University, top-notch scholar in his field. Dr. Pressman, PhD, psychologist, smart guy, Villanova, great basketball school, also a good, he's qualified. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say that Dr. Pressman's, just because he's Villanova, has any less expertise. But here's the deal. Dr. Rye examined Tex McIver personally. He did all the studies. He produced all the data that was used that led him to reach his conclusion. He produced all the data, did all the studies, hands-on, in the lab, in Emory, that Dr. Pressman ultimately relied on. Okay, so at least to that extent, Dr. Rye has more hands-on experience, and as I said, is an MD. Dr. Rye says that stress can actually lead to going to sleep. Okay, he talked about, on an ad hoc basis that he's been able to determine from his students that sometimes they take stress naps. Okay, because of stress, they actually fall asleep. But that's not what's really important. What's really important is that Dr. Pressman didn't rely on any data or scientific studies to say, this is what he testified yesterday, he didn't rely on any scientific studies to say, after an experience that is scary enough that you would get a gun, that you couldn't fall asleep in however many minutes it takes to get from Edgewood to the park. He just said it just makes sense. Okay, so he put expertise to the side and said someone who is that scared is not going to fall asleep in 2, 3, or 4 minutes. Okay? And he bases that on having reviewed police reports. Okay, he says, I read Tex McIver's statement, I read the reports, and he said the hair stood up in the back of my neck. He says, that's the basis of my conclusion. He said the hair stood up on the back of my neck, therefore he couldn't have fallen asleep in 3 minutes. Look, saying things like the hair stood up in the back of my neck is the way people talk, right? It's like saying, I was so scared I peed in my pants. It doesn't really necessarily mean that. It's just a figure of speech, right? And yet Dr. Pressman uses that as dogma. Use that fact, and from that you can infer he in fact didn't fall back asleep. Mr. McIver never said, I was so scared I felt like I was in the battlefield in Baghdad or Afghanistan, like I was on the turret of a tank with my gun out, looking for danger. He didn't say that, and that's not what happened. Okay, he didn't say I was that scared, I was alarmed, I thought any second I was going to have to start shooting. He said, I got off at Edgewood. This is what he's telling the police that Dr. Pressman reads. I got off at Edgewood. I saw people that scared me. It made me scared, so I asked for my gun. He didn't even take it out of the public's bag. They agreed with that. So it's not the kind of fear and anxiety and terror that Dr. Pressman then uses to extrapolate and say, therefore he couldn't have fallen asleep. It was not that kind of fear, even though he used the expression, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. But even more importantly, most importantly, Dr. Pressman concludes based on reading police reports, he couldn't have fallen asleep. But the problem with that is, first of all, Tex McIver said he fell asleep. Accept that for what it's worth. Danny Joe said he fell asleep. And when a man was talking to him yesterday and said, if Danny Joe said, he said, she's wrong. That's what Dr. Pressman said yesterday. If Danny Joe said he had fallen asleep, she's wrong. You know who else said he fell asleep? Diane. You remember the testimony? The testimony is that Diane said, Tex, wake up! If you don't wake up, you're not going to go to sleep tonight at the condo. Shot. Okay. Miss Christensen hears that, and Annie Anderson hears that. The three people in the car say he had fallen back asleep again. Three people in the car say he had fallen back asleep again between Edgewood and Piedmont. Okay? Versus Dr. Pressman, who flies down from Philadelphia, the third expert the state had to hire. Remember he testified that? I wasn't the first expert. The third expert they hire, who's never met Tex McIver, who's never been in the sleep study at Emory, who's just reading our experts' reports and data, says couldn't have fallen asleep. So, is he credentialed? Is he a smart guy? You bet. If I have sleep disorder, I might very well go to Dr. Pressman if he's cheaper than Dr. Rye anyways. But listen, can you say beyond a reasonable doubt Dr. Pressman is right and Dr. Rye is wrong? How can you possibly say that given Diane thought he was asleep? Danny Joe said he was asleep. He said he was asleep. And the only basis for Dr. Pressman's opinion is he starts with the belief that the hair was standing up on the back of his neck. So, another doubt. Why does someone who's about to commit a deliberate, planned, calculated murder fall asleep? Why hold the gun sideways on your lap? And you all went down with the car. I didn't have an overcoat, so I didn't go with you yesterday, but as you know, I've been in the car before because you got a picture of me sitting there. Okay? The gun is sideways. It's on his lap. Okay? We've had plenty of demonstrations of that. I'm not going to pull out a chair and do it again for you. Okay? Whoever intentionally kills someone and has the gun like this on their lap? I mean, who would think? I mean, is he so devious? Is he so clever? I'm going to keep the gun sideways so people won't think I shot intentionally. Is that the prosecution's theory? He kept the gun sideways so it would look more like an accident. The gun was sideways. It was lying on his lap. It's the only physical way that that bullet could have entered the back of that seat at the angle that it did, based on his height, same height as my height basically, in the trajectory into the back of the seat. Why shoot through the public's back? And does this make sense? It's a calculated, intentional, planned murder. And I'm going to keep a gun in a public spot. Right? They had a theory in an opening statement about that. And they developed it a little bit through their gun expert. He was trying to hide the gunshot residue. Okay? You heard that from Steve Griffin during the opening statement. That's how devious this man is. I'm going to put the gun in. They even start talking about the fact, where's the Publix in relation to the ranch? Remember that? Is there a Publix near the ranch? He must have gone out and bought some groceries to camouflage the fact that he wanted a Publix grocery bag to bring back, to the expedition. But their theory is that he wants to hide the gunshot residue so that the gun will be inside the bag, and when he shoots it, the gunshot residue not comes out the barrel, but what comes out near the revolver won't get on his hand. Well, what sense does that make? He's never denied being the one who shot the gun. Why are you trying to hide the fact that there's gunshot residue on your hand? What sense does it make to say he didn't want any gunshot residue to get on his hand because what? He told everybody, I shot the gun. What is the sense of using a Publix bag as some kind of disguise? It makes no sense at all. Why shoot through the car seat? Okay. The car seat, I don't know if it was unzipped for you yesterday or what you saw, but you saw pictures. The inside of the car seat's full of all this metal and air conditioning and heating coils and springs. Why would you shoot someone like that? Why would you think the best way to commit this murder is to shoot through the back of a car seat and just hope that the bullet is going to kill my wife? You could shoot it right outside the car. I don't want to get too graphic and morbid, but you could shoot her in the head. Why would you shoot through a car seat and not know if you're going to succeed in your mission? As Connery says, aim for center mass. This was not aim for center mass. And that's a police term where if someone's coming at you, you shoot for the chest. Okay? That's what the police are trained to do. It's what Army soldiers are trained to do. You don't shoot up in the air, you don't shoot in the ground, you don't shoot at someone's shins, you shoot at center mass, you're aiming for the heart. Okay? That's the term of art that they use. He has a gun down on his lap, sideways, into the, bottom portion of a car seat. If you're trying to kill your wife for and it's a financial motive, okay, what happens if you don't succeed? What happens if the bullet strikes her and incapacitates her for life? Then you got medical bills for the rest of your life and no income. It makes no sense. It makes no sense that this is the way you would intentionally and calculatedly plan a murder. Dan, hand me the gun. Right? This is their theory. He doesn't have the gun with him in the back seat. He didn't bring the gun with, out of the ranch and put it underneath the back seat, hide it there. So as soon as this opportune moment occurs, as soon as that occurs, I'm going to shoot her. I don't know what the state's theory is going to be. Clint Rucker gets to talk last. I'm sure he'll have some fabulous ideas about. He probably found out when they were going to be doing construction on the interstate. It's not that hard. They're always doing construction on the interstate. But he probably figured there'd be construction on the interstate. And I bet while I'm asleep, Danny Joe will pull off onto Edgewood Avenue. This is all planned out ahead of time. And then he has to ask his wife for the gun. And if the Publix bag was part of his plan, that's what they said, it's part of this devious plan to keep the gunshot residue, she's going to have to hand him back the gun with the Publix bag, in the Publix bag, and give it to him. Who would ever plan to commit a murder and ask the victim to please hand me the gun? All this business at Emory. Okay, I'm sorry I had to deal with every single Emory witness. Why? Bruce and Amanda told me I had to do Emory witness. I will never forgive them. But we had enough of them, right? Do you all remember? It was like 19 weeks of Emory witnesses. And I had to be asking the same thing over and over again. You don't like the way he acted, right? You don't think he acted appropriately. He didn't grieve the way you're supposed to grieve. Okay? You don't need me to go through that litany again. And yet, if you think about it, if it's a planned, calculated murder, why doesn't he do what everybody would expect someone to do? Start crying. Keep an onion in your pocket. Do something to make it look more like you're grieving. Okay? Cry, writhe on the ground, pound the walls. I can't believe what's happened. I can't believe my wife is dying. I can't believe any of these. You'd have a consistent story. You'd be telling the same thing because it's all planned out ahead of time. It's all part of this deliberate plot. All of this would have been figured out ahead of time. So all of this evidence about the absence of proper grieving is actually evidence that it's not a planned, calculated murder. Because that's the kind of thing you would take care of in a planned, calculated murder. Whoa. End of argument.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
You're welcome. He calls, now, be careful with Ms. Convery's argument this morning. Calling a lawyer didn't happen from the car, right? He calls Mr. Maples, the lawyer, after they're at Emory, after she's been brought into the ER, and maybe after the upstairs. But at any rate, it's after. He doesn't call a lawyer from the car. That's not true, if that's what was implied. But again, if it's a planned, deliberate murder, why call the lawyer? Because it does look weird. Why would you do that? Why would you do that if the whole thing was a plan to make it look like an accident, when in fact it was a murder? Let the lawyer stay home. Okay? So all these things that look suspicious, like calling a lawyer and not crying and rolling around on the ground or whatever they wanted him to do, was proof that it wasn't a planned murder. Why tell Danny Joe to pretend you weren't here if it's a planned, calculated murder disguised as an accident? What does Danny Joe say happened? She says it was an accident. She says it was a terrible accident. If it's a planned murder, why do you tell Danny Joe, tell him you weren't here? It's completely illogical. You'd say, please yell it from the rooftops. Go rent a blimp and put the moving thing. It was an accident. Put up a billboard. It was an accident. You wouldn't tell her to say you weren't here if it was a calculated, planned murder. Danny Joe says it was an accident. That's a reasonable doubt. Right there is a reasonable doubt that this is not, in fact, a deliberate, intentional murder. Diane tells the doctors and the nurses it was an accident. Is that part of the plot? Is that something that the state's going to claim, that Tex McIver had this thing so well planned and calculated, he convinced the last words that his wife said was, it was an accident? We're not talking about reasonable doubts here. We're talking about just astonishing improbabilities. It is just outstanding how unlikely it is, given all of these factors. It is outstandingly improbable that this was an intentional, methodical, calculated, well-planned out murder. And you're going to convince your wife somehow, maybe through ESP or some kind of mental game he's got, a Jedi, whatever they are, I'm going to convince my wife to tell Dr. Hardy it was an accident. It was an accident. That's what happened in the car that night. Danny Joe knows it. Diane knows it. None of the facts support the state's theory that this was well planned out intentionally. None of them do. All of these, you don't need 16 deaths. Here's the last one. Why don't they have a motive that makes any sense? A consistent theory, something that makes sense here. Their arguments about money are not accurate. Their arguments about being picked on are ridiculous, trivial. Another woman, the masseuse. I'm going to get to that. Jealous? Why doesn't the state have some explanation about this planned, deliberate, well thought out murder?
No, you keep it.
I am. You started at 10:10, so you're at 10:45.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
As Convery says, that's 16 deaths. Okay? If you go through your notes for the past 7 weeks, I'm sure you'll have more. Okay? You don't all have to agree on it. You don't have to agree. It does not have to be a unanimous decision that reasonable doubt number 7 is what is just a sticking point for me. I cannot find this man guilty of murder based on reasonable doubt number 7 or 9 or 12 on Mr. Samuel's list. You don't have to have unanimity about that. You just have to agree that there's just so many reasonable doubts or so many hurdles that the prosecution has to overcome in this case. There's no way we can say we have 0 doubts, 0 reasonable doubts, and this is a murder. Is he a murderer who committed a planned, intentional, calculated murder? 16 reasons. It makes absolutely no sense in this case. And Mr. Harvey's going to talk about, how likely it was, given all of those doubts about this calculated, planned, deliberate murder. It's equally ridiculous to think at 10 o'clock at night, on a Sunday night, he decided, I've had enough, I'm going to kill her. All right. Now, I got to get into the doldrums and like Ms. Convery. She did it very well, and I have very few disagreements with her. Although, obviously, we see the facts different. Your job's the facts. Judge's job is the law. Okay. The indictment, just like Ms. Convery said, 5 counts at this point. Okay. We have murder, we have felony murder, we have aggravated assault, firearm during the commission of felony, and misleading Danny Jo Carter at Emory University, EUH's Emory University Hospital. Those are the 5 counts, just like she said. Okay? I'm going to go through these a little quicker because Ms. Convery fortunately did it for me. Murder. In order to be guilty of count 1, murder, it has to be, I intended to kill her. Okay? It doesn't have to be premeditated for a month or a year. But by golly, when I pulled that trigger, my intent was to kill. Okay? That is absolutely the required element of murder. The deliberate intention to unlawfully take away the life of another human being. If you don't find that, you're finished with count 1, murder. If you have a reasonable doubt, any doubt, one of my 16, however many more Bruce's can add to the list, your own, if you have a reasonable doubt, we're done with count 1, murder. Slightly different order. If you find that it was not intentional, okay? So this is your first detour. If you find it was not intentional, but that he was reckless, then you're still on count 1. You find something that's not in the indictment but is on the verdict form, you find involuntary manslaughter. That is within count 1. It's a little tricky, but you'll see it on the verdict form and you'll certainly see it in the judge's instructions. If you find no intent to kill, but that he was reckless, you can find involuntary manslaughter based on reckless conduct. Separate crime. Still count 1. With me? Here's reckless conduct. In order to go that path, you have to find that he consciously, did I spell that right? Consciously, intentionally disregarded a substantial and unjustifiable risk that his act would cause harm. So even though reckless doesn't require intent to kill, it doesn't mean you don't have to have a state of mind at all. You do have to have a state of mind. You have to intentionally disregard a known and unjustifiable risk. I'll give you an example. It looks like Convery does so well. I'm on the back porch of my house. There's a bunch of squirrels that are eating all the bird food. You know who's in the yard behind my yard? A nursery school. I don't want to kill any of the kids. I don't want to kill kids. lose my law license if I do that. But those squirrels, they bug me. They're eating the bird food. I'm going to start shooting squirrels. That is a deliberate intention to disregard a known risk. Okay? Shooting at squirrels in my backyard is reckless conduct. It's actually a crime. It's reckless conduct to do that because I'm disregarding the risk to the neighbors and the school behind. The state's theory on that, although Ms. Congress is getting into that, don't pay attention to it, just find them not guilty of that. Well, we agree with that, frankly. We agree this doesn't even qualify as reckless conduct. I'll tell you why, because he's not intentionally disregarding a known risk. He falls asleep with the gun in his lap. There's no intent. There's no intent when he does that to disregard a known risk. You can say it's stupid. Nobody should have a loaded gun. Maybe some of you hate the NRA. Nobody should have a gun at all. Fine. You can believe that. But that's not what the law is. There's no crime in having a gun in your car. There's no crime in having a loaded gun in your car. And there's no crime with having a loaded gun in your lap. It's just not a crime. And if something terrible happens and the gun goes off because your finger's on the trigger, it's an accident. It's not an intentional, consciously disregarding a risk. Just struck you if it's an accident. If he lacks the intent to kill and lacks the intention deliberately to disregard a known risk, he's not guilty of murder and he's not guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Absent that state of mind that you have to find beyond a reasonable doubt, he's not guilty of both those prongs of count one. I'm going to skip count two and go right to count three first, then come back to two. Count three is aggravated assault. Again, Karen did that exactly right. Okay? You intentionally, not by accident, not pointing a pistol at another unintentionally, you intentionally pointed a gun and fired it in order to be guilty of aggravated assault in count three. It's the same as murder. There's no difference. If you find an absence of intent to murder, logically you have to find him not guilty of aggravated assault. It's the same crime. It's just the first step. It's the shooting. Okay? It's necessary for the evidence to show beyond a reasonable doubt that he attempted to cause a violent injury. That's aggravated assault. It requires proof of intent to cause a violent injury. If you lack that intent, not reckless, nothing else but intent, there's no aggravated assault. That's count three. Now let me go back to count two. Count two says, if you did commit the crime of aggravated assault, if you find him guilty of count three, and the intentional shooting of the gun resulted in death, okay, then you're guilty of felony murder. Okay. Again, you have to intend to shoot the weapon and shoot that in the gun in count three. If they prove that, you're also guilty of count two, logically, because the result of that was death. Listen, all three of them are essentially the same thing. If there's no intent to kill, no intent to shoot, there's no murder, there's no felony murder, there's no aggravated assault. If you have any doubt, reasonable doubt, that he intended to shoot that gun into her back and kill her, then it's not guilty on 1, 2, and 3. It's that simple. If there's no aggravated assault, there cannot be felony murder. If it's an accident, then it's not guilty on 1, not guilty on 2, not guilty on 3. Count 4, using a firearm during the commission of a felony. If there's no felony in 1, 2, and 3, you can't find him guilty on 4. It's that simple. Count 5, completely different subject. Conversation with Danny Joe Carter in the hospital. And this is a weird statute. And it is a weird indictment and a weird set of circumstances. And it's so weird, I'm going to make Bruce talk about it. But before I do, I just want to make sure we understand what this statute is. It is not a crime to tell someone to lie. That's not what's charged in this indictment. It's not what the statute says. Okay? So please remember that. It is not a crime if all that is proved is that Tex McIver told Danny Joe Carter to lie. If that's what you find, and that's all you find, not guilty. Because the statute says, it may be some other crime, by the way, but it's not this crime. It's avoiding perjury, if there was testimony, all kinds of things. It's not this crime. Count 5 says that what Tex McIver did was he misled Danny Joe Carter. That statute makes it a crime to mislead a witness. It's designed when people try to trick someone into telling a lie, to trick them into telling a lie. You tell your accountant something, change a couple lines in that, I forgot to tell you this, and then the accountant goes and reports it to the police. You're misleading the accountant to make him the vehicle to tell a lie to the police. If you don't mislead the accountant, if you just tell him, go tell a lie, that's not this statute. That's not this crime. And what the indictment says here is, he told her to say she wasn't there. There was nothing misleading about that. She knew she was there. He knew she was there. She knew he knew she was there. They all knew she was there. She just driven into the driveway. So he's not misleading her. He is asking her to tell her something that's not true. It's completely inexplicable. It makes no sense at all. But one thing's for sure, he's not misleading Danny Joe Carter. And that's what the statute is. Asking a witness to lie is not what he's charged with. What is alleged is that Mr. McIver intentionally misled Danny Joe Carter, not the police. We're not talking about misleading the police, we're talking about misleading the witness. Look at the judge's instruction, look at the indictment. That's what he's charged with. Mislead her so that she'll mislead someone else. You want to say that was stupid behavior, outrageous behavior, criminal behavior? Fine. Turn the verdict form over and write on the back, whatever that business was in the hospital with Danny Joe Carter, it was whatever. Criminal, stupid, idiotic, inexplicable. But when it comes time to filling out the verdict form, he's not guilty of this crime because he did not mislead or attempt to mislead Danny Joe Carter. She knew she was the driver of the car. The state's argument in this case, basically, and Mr. Rucker will surprise us all and educate us all about what their real theory is going to be here. But it's essentially based on speculation and red herrings. Speculation. There must have been a second will. Speculation. She must have been getting ready to foreclose on the $350,000. Speculation. They must have been arguing in private. There must have been all these private arguments that none of the friends know about. I mean, that's going to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt to speculate that all the evidence we heard in here was not the real case, it's the things we don't know about that supports guilt, then we lose. If Mr. Rucker can convince you to speculate about 20 or 30 different things, none of which we've heard any evidence about, then we lose. And then there's the red herrings. And I'm going to spend, I'm going to get tired, a lot of time talking about red herrings. You all know what a red herring is? That's a red herring. There's no such thing as a red herring. A red herring is a herring from the 19th century. Hunters used to overcook herrings, smoke them till they turned red and got unbelievably smelly. Okay? They're so smelly that they would distract the hound dogs on a hunt. And they would train the dogs, okay, to not be distracted. They would take these red herrings and they would drag them across the trail where the foxes were so that they could train the dogs, don't get distracted by a red herring, follow the fox. That's where the expression red herring came from. It's a distraction. It's something designed to throw you off the trail. That's what a red herring. You've all heard the expression red herrings. I'm glad I can educate you about the background of it. There's two types of red herrings in this case. There's just flat out false evidence to distract you. Flat out lies. And then there's the distractions that probably are true but are completely irrelevant. They're just distractions. They have nothing to do with proving murder. And I'm going to go through them. You've been here a long time, so you're going to have to listen to me a little longer. If this were a 3-day trial, I'd be done already. Who remembers Gail Meadows and Elaine Williams? Way back. I don't know how many notebooks you all gone through. You've got to go back to your first notebook, right about the first page. Gail Meadows is the what do you call it, receptionist. Remember that? She's the receptionist, and Tex comes in one day, and he's mad about something. This is Thursday. That was the entire testimony. We kept waiting. What was he mad about? I don't know. Did he have papers in it? Oh, I know. I know the theory. He must have been going to get the second will. He was going to break into her office, break into the safe, get the second will. He didn't have any papers, she said. There were no papers. What was this all about? You want to know why you've been here 7 weeks? Because of stuff like this. Okay? He was angry on Thursday afternoon about something. Maybe someone, road rage. Maybe someone took his parking space. But, folks, it was the seed of the murder. It was the beginning of the murder. It was that Thursday, is what Mr. Rucker's going to say. He was angry about something. He walked into the office, he walked down the hall, Diane wasn't there, and he walked out, and he was angry. Elaine Williams, she was the next witness. Okay? She saw Diane the next day. Okay? Diane was distraught about something. What was she distraught about? I have no idea. That was it. You all know what Clint Rucker's going to do. He's going to prance up and down here. He's going to walk back to the podium and then walk over here like a peacock. And, we're going to hear all about this was the beginning. The storm clouds are brewing. Not that an argument. The storm clouds are brewing, right? He's angry. She's distraught. And what a waste of time to have to listen to this testimony. And then he asked her, what were the last words you said to her? I love you. I get it. It's sad. What does that have to do with this case? In fact, the Mandarin gets up and says, how did you end every conversation? We always said, I love you at the end of a conversation. But this is not what should be going on in a criminal courtroom. That kind of stuff. And then you remember this? We had to fight about this one. Danny Jo, this is Friday afternoon. Danny Jo comes in and her shirt's untucked in the back. You remember that? You got to go back to your notes, back into last year sometime. Danny Jo's wearing tight blue jeans and her shirt's untucked, and he's staring at her. This was why I say, well, maybe they know what it is another woman. I bet you all thought at that point the other woman was going to be Danny Jo Carter. We have no idea yet. This was their testimony. This is their testimony they present to you at the beginning of this trial. More red herrings. What hospital did Danny Jo drive to? Okay. First, you remember the business about the 10th Street fire station? You remember that? They showed that. Turns out they were never on 10th Street. They just threw that into their little scanning machine here so you'd know that there was a fire station there and act like you'd been driving right past it. And then, I'm not going to go into the billboards again. I promised everybody I wouldn't do anything more with Emery. He went to the hospital he knew, right? And Danny Jo never said, let's go to Piedmont. He said, no, whatever we do, don't go to Piedmont. Piedmont's not a trauma center either. And for that matter, Emory Midtown's not a trauma center. Okay? Everybody knows Emory is one of the top hospitals in the planet. Okay? I'm not going to do it. I promise. But the billboards don't say I'm doing it. The billboards don't say, whatever you do, don't come here with a gunshot. He goes to the hospital he knows. Look at Defendant's Exhibit 15. Right after the shooting, a big sign. Emory Hospital, turn right here. It's on Morningside. We showed you that picture. Prosecution didn't show you that. Okay. And, it did not call 911. I can't remember who testified. Who's ever driving their car to a hospital and pulls over and parks and tries to call 911? It's idiotic. Okay. Maybe it's the smart thing to do. We all learned a lesson. Park your car, pull into a 7-Eleven, pull into a parking lot somewhere, and call 911 and sit there and wait and hope someone will come soon. They got to the Emory in 7 minutes. And now they say, well, clearly it's a murder because they didn't call 911. not going to do it. Demeanor at the hospital. You know, it's a shame that people lose loved ones. This was a unique, catastrophic tragedy. Okay? If any of you have lost a parent or a child, everybody acts differently. Husbands and wives act differently. Everybody acts differently to grief. Okay? You don't need me to tell you that again. But this grief is particularly weird because he was the instrumentality. He had the gun in his hand. The only thing I can compare it to is if you're driving a car and you get distracted like the texting driver, and you kill your spouse. Okay, there's a lot of weird emotions going on. You just killed your spouse because of an accident. Of course you're going to be completely, weirded out, my kids would say. The delay in the cremation, I have to do this witness. She's cremated because her will says she wants to be cremated. The will says the estate has to pay for the cremation. It's in every will. Every will that's ever been written, I've never written one, I'm a lawyer, but every will says cost of burial paid by the estate, cost of cremation paid by the estate. So he's got to open a bank account, opens the bank account, and eventually writes a check, the first check out of that checkbook for cost of cremation. Plus he wants all these little 10 little cremation pottery things. What a red hair that is, right? We know you murdered your wife. We know you murdered your wife. How do we know you murdered your wife? Because you waited 4 weeks to go pick up the cremains. That's the theory. That's one of their red herrings. One of their pieces of circumstantial evidence why you should find him guilty of murder. 6 different versions. This was the prosecution's opening statement. Sue Griffin's opening statement. I shot her in the bathroom. Okay, remember there's one nurse who says she's walking by, and while Blair Brown and Nurse Allison Neely are going the other way with the wheelchair, she hears him say, I shot her in the bathroom while I was cleaning my gun. There's no way that happened. What bathroom? At the Longhorn? What are we talking about? She didn't hear that. She heard something else, and that's what she thought she heard. Shine was that doctor. She's now the cab general. Yeah. Maybe shot her in the back, maybe shot her in the back. So who knows what was said? But that can't possibly be what he said. And Blair Brown didn't hear, and Allison, and we had to bring them back to say, we never heard anything like that. I shot her in the back and I was cleaning my gun. And the nurse who hears that's not walking with her. She's walking the other way. They're crossing paths, and that's what she hears. Diane shot herself. That was in the opening statement. The doctor says, that's not what I heard her say. I never heard her say that. This is the doctor who got on the stand and said, I don't even know why I've been called as a witness in this case. The second half. That's the second version of it that they talked about in the opening statement. Hit a bump. He doesn't say that. He's asleep. He doesn't know. He's startled awake when Diane yells at him to wake up. He doesn't know whether they hit a bump. Danny Joe thought they'd actually been hit from behind at first. He says the first reaction I had was I thought maybe we'd been hit because of the noise. And then Hill Street, come on. Go back to Hill Street again. Stringer gets on the stand and says that's the first thing he said. We had an accident on Hill Street. And Clint Rucker got up and said, you never told me that before. He's impeaching him. You never told me that before. I've interviewed you how many times, and you get on the stand here, and for the first time, you say that Mr. McIver said he got hit on Hill Street? He's impeaching him. He goes to the Stringer goes to the grand jury and testifies under oath and didn't say anything about that. Mr. Ryder brings that out. He says, where did that come from? Took away by our best cross-examination. He did it all himself. He never said that. I'm going to talk to you about asking a lawyer to help you after you accidentally shoot your wife. That's a red herring. That's not evidence of guilt. That's just another distraction. If you have a car accident and you've killed your spouse, especially if you're a lawyer, you call a lawyer, of course you do. There's nothing suspicious about that. I hate to say it, that's the way lawyers think. We think we should have lawyers. We like lawyers. We trust lawyers. We're scared. There's nothing suspicious about calling Steve Maples and saying, I need you to come to the hospital. I need you to help me with this problem. I don't know whether I should talk to someone, because I pulled the damn trigger. Of course he's calling Steve Maples. He says, I don't know what to do. I need you to give me advice. It's proof that it was an accident and not a planned murder. Moreover, Andy Anderson, boy, shame on you. Shame on the prosecution. You all know what was going on for those days when we had to hear about Andy the masseuse. Shame on that. You all know what you were thinking. Everybody was thinking the same thing. He's having sex with the masseuse. That's why they put that evidence in. That's why they had Danny Joe say, oh, he was having a massage in the marital bed. Who? Annie. Right? Everybody's going, we're all going, oh, sex with the masseuse. And then she's there, she goes to the bedroom that night. She's in the bedroom, and then she drives out to the ranch, and she's wearing Diane's boots. Well, that was unfair. You know all these people. You can tell from our interaction, we deal with each other all the time. That wasn't right. That wasn't right what they did. It wasn't right what they did to the defense in this case. It wasn't right what they did to you, and it sure as heck wasn't right what they did to Annie Anderson. She talked to you about that. She humiliated her. The press and the anguish it's caused her and what the prosecution was implying by that. They don't mention her husband's there. They knew, because they'd already interviewed her, that all these little seeds, maybe he's having sex with the masseuse. They knew it wasn't true. If that's how weak their case is, they do stuff like that. Let's just talk about Annie the masseuse in the bedroom giving a massage. Okay. She says she's there because the doctor who's there says, I'm concerned about the drugs he's taking, I'm concerned about suicide, someone needs to stay with him. And they turn that into some nefarious, illicit sexual relationship. Shame on them. It's like, we'll just plant the seed. Mr. Rucker's going to get up and say, I never said they were having sex. I never said they were having sex. It's like, it's planting the seed. Like in the Shakespeare play, Othello. Iago does that. We just plant a few seeds out there. They're not really true, but I'll just let the minds of everybody who hears it, let the seed germinate. Okay? And it just was untrue. Driving to the ranch because he's not allowed to drive. He's taking anti-anxiety drugs or whatever. And then the boots. Mr. Grover gets up here and says, oh, she's wearing that. That's untrue. It just wasn't true. That tells you something about their case, doesn't it? This is what they're relying on. This is the kind of evidence. This shows it was a murder. How does this show it's a murder? The auction. He's guilty because this is a classic Mr. Grover. Not one fur for sentimental value. He's prancing up and down talking about the furs for sentimental value. Here's first. Stan Smith tells you. He tells you, Stan Smith's the lawyer. I told him he had to settle first. We got to pay the mortgage. We got to pay eventually the beneficiaries, but not right away. Conceivably. We have to pay the utilities. We have to pay. There's all kinds of. You know who else we got to pay? Stan Smith needs to get paid. You want me to be the lawyer? I got to get paid. Okay? You've got to raise money. She's not making any money anymore. It's the estate that needs to be cash. Sell the furs. What are you going to do with the furs? Sell the furs. Sell the jewelry. Sell it at all. Can you imagine if Mr. McIver had not followed that advice and had kept some of the furs? They'd say he was a thief. They'd say, you see how broke he is? He took some of the furs out of the estate and didn't sell them just so he could. Imagine this. Imagine if he'd taken a fur and given it to another woman, Oh boy, would we be hearing about that. So he does what the lawyer says. He sells the furs, and they're saying, there you go, you didn't keep a single fur for yourself. No sentimental value, you're a murderer. How about, do I go past my jewelry already?
You are trying to split evenly with Mr. Harvey. You used up about 5 of his minutes.
Okay. Mr. Dickerson, he'll deal with you later. Yeah. He says, my impression was, that's what he was, this is the drive. My impression was he was referring to Paul. He never said give money to Paul Howard. That was just my impression of what our conversation was. I asked him to repeat it 10 times. This is your impression. And every time he said, yes, it's just my impression. He never told anybody until a couple months ago, 2 months ago, right before this trial, still a couple months ago, you know. At Merrimack's restaurant, he tells Paul Howard about this. Well over a year after the incident, by the way, crazy text. He said I could, split the success fee with anybody I wanted. My impression was he was talking about you. This is Jeff Dickerson talking to Paul Howard. Paul Howard says, whoa! When you call Cliff, you just got a new witness. January this year. Never told the police, never told the lawyer, never told the DA, and you're taking us $3,000 a month. And they're saying, well, this was a bribe attempt. Well, what's Mr. Dickerson doing? He doesn't tell anybody until a couple weeks before the trial starts. He calls Paul Howard and says, let's go and have lunch. That's some other subject he brings up. No bribe here. The jewelry, Angie Brooks. Right? Angie Brooks is the office manager. She says those rubies, they were supposed to be from me. He sold them at auction. He sold my rubies. We're all going, this doesn't look good. He's selling this individual, this woman's rubies at the auction. They didn't bother to call Marilyn Oliver and say, why were these rubies sold? That's right in the will to give the rubies and the diamonds on my jewelry, but the ruby diamonds to Angie Brooks. It was all a lie. He hadn't sold her jewelry. The state says the jewelry in the auction book, total value, $10,000 to $15,000. Those are the diamonds and rubies. Mary Morgan Oliver's sitting here with the rubies and diamonds. She's got, these weren't Angie Brooks's. She's got diamonds worth $83,000 in jewelry. These are the items that are going to Angie Brooks. These are the rubies and diamonds that are going. They're still going to her. He didn't sell her rubies and diamonds. It was just another distraction, and not even a true one. Just a lie. It just wasn't true. Hundreds of thousands of dollars the estate's paying. It's the lawyers. Of course lawyers get paid. We love to get paid. We're always the first ones to get paid. We're not going to be your lawyer if you don't pay us. Stan Smith gets over $100,000. Mary Margaret Oliver's getting $60,000 or $70,000. There was a lawsuit with Billy Corey's claim. That guy got over, Watkins gets over $100,000. None of that money's going to Tex. That's not Tex's money. It's not theft. It's not using that estate money. That's money that's all going to pay the expenses of the estate. And yet, we spent a couple of days talking about that. And then this whole Black Lives Matter thing. Jeez. You heard me go through this with Mr. Crane. I don't want to have to waste any more time. I'm not charged with this. He's trying to explain to the PR guy, who should never be a PR guy again after letting this happen, he's trying to explain to the guy why I was scared. Stupid reason, racially insensitive reason, whatever. He explains I was scared. I didn't know if they were homeless, carjackers, protesters. Call them whatever you want to call them. Call them any name you want to call them. That's what he told his people. It's not what he told the police, by the way. He told the police I was scared. There were a bunch of people congregating at the bottom of Edgewood, and I got scared. Later, he tells the PR guy, I thought maybe it was one of the protesters. One of the protests. And it makes sense for him to have said that, because we just had the protests in Atlanta and Charlotte. It's got nothing to do with this case.
facts of this case. If you want to turn that verdict form over again, write something about Black Lives Matter, that it's disgusting what he's saying. It's racist, it's whatever, but it's got nothing to do with the facts of this case. This is their blueprint. We are going to vilify Tex McIver. We are going to muddy him up. We are going to make this jury not like him. That's their mission. That's what we've been doing for 6.5, 7 weeks. He acted irrationally after his wife died. He was worried about money. Greedy? Go ahead, call him greedy. He lacks social skills. Lord knows he lacks social skills. He looks at another woman, Danny Joe, or Jamie Calhoun, or whatever. He gets a massage. He's not sentimental about her jewelry and her furs. Some people, when a spouse dies, they move out of the apartment. They can't stand to be there anymore. It's so sad. But oh no, he sells the furs. There you go. There you go. He's a flawed person. Okay? He's not perfect. He's not even close to being perfect. He's not even within 10 miles of being perfect. They proved that. They did a very good job. They really vilified him. That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying. Because of all those things, by golly, you should feel comfortable finding him guilty of murder.
Bruce, do you mind having another cup of food?
I started out by telling you you'll never forget this experience. You are not going to forget the last 6 or 7 years. I guarantee you. 10 years, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, we're going to be sitting at the dinner table. The kids will be there, your grandkids will be there. And someone's going to say, one of your adult kids, I just got a jury summons. What a waste of time. And your grandkid's going to say to you, Grandma, Grandpa, I'll call you Grandma. Grand, you ever served on a jury? They would say, I sure did. You're going to remember. You're going to remember. Early spring, late winter of 2018. What kind of case was it, Grant? What kind of case was it? Murder. Murder case involving a man named Tex McIver. Your grandkid eyes into his frisbees now. You were a juror in a murder case? What was it about? What did you do? Tell him that guy in the car was a perfect person. Backseat of car, shoots the gun. The whole case was a murder or was it an accident? What did you decide? What did you decide? You're going to say it was not easy. It was not easy. And, the jury system in our country is the most majestic institution that we have. We all don't have to raise campaign contributions. We don't have political action committees. You don't make ridiculous speeches about all the things you'll accomplish. You don't need a black robe. You don't have to sit up high. You got more power than anyone. Just 12 people in here. Young, old, men, women, black, white. Well, more power than anybody else in this country. Some of you celebrate Easter. Some of you celebrate Passover. But all of you just come and serve the country by being a juror. And tell me, grandkid, experience. What did you do? How did you decide? You say, we were bored at times, we were hungry at times, had to go to the bathroom at times. It was a pain in the neck to deal with our family problems, our work problems, our vacation schedules. Or was it an experience? When we walked out, 12 of us walked out into that jury room to deliberate, it was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. It was the most inspiring, awesome obligation I've ever had. I walked out, the 12 of us in that jury room had to make a decision. What did you do? How did you decide? We were back there for many hours, maybe days, I can't remember now, it seems like forever. We laughed a little bit, thinking about some of the lawyers. Actually, cried a little bit. Very sad things. We thought about the lawyers. The lawyers all did a good job. All prosecution lawyers, defense lawyers. They worked really hard. Their job is nothing compared to our job. Nothing. They just do the best they can with the evidence. We had to go out there and make a decision. Grand. What did you decide? You deliberated with dignity. You deliberated with grace. We deliberated with compassion. And I'll tell you what, we walked out of that room, proudest moment of my life.